Let's get some business news for you now. Cole Stangler's with us in the studio. And Cole, we're going to start out with some big promises from foreign corporations who want to invest in France.
That's right. Monday marked the third annual Choose France Summit, forum launched by President Emmanuel Macron to try and highlight France's pro-business credentials. More than 200 foreign companies took part in this year's edition at the ritzy Palace of Versailles. According to the Élysée, they announced investments totaling some 4 billion euros. It's welcome news for the French president. Earlier in the day, he was in the city of Dunkirk, where he defended his economic record.
Good news doesn't just happen by miracle. It happens because we're reforming. Our country is moving forward. It's mobilizing. It's convincing big bosses around the world. It's making reforms that cover taxes, labor, and the organization of our regions to attract these investments again.
Now, one of the firms that announced new investments today is Coca-Cola. It says it's spending up to 1 billion euros over the next 5 years, much of it going to a plant in northern France. But not everyone's pleased, as the soft drink maker has a complicated environmental legacy. Sam Bradpiece has more. Looks like we're going to be actually taking a look at the day's trading action instead, I guess.
Let's do that.
So we're turning now to the markets here. Markets actually closed in the United States for Martin Luther King Day, but the major European indices were open, and now we're turning to those markets right now. You can see a mixed bag to start the week here. The FTSE finishing the day in the red, down about 1/3%. Similar story over on the CAC 40 here in France. Meanwhile, the DAX in Frankfurt up around 1/5%. Now, investors were also taking in some dour news from the International Monetary Fund. On the eve of the World Economic Forum Summit in Davos, Switzerland, the fund has revised its annual growth projections downward. The IMF now projects global growth to reach 3.3% this year, down 0.1% from its previous forecast back in October. Growth next year, meanwhile, projected to hit 3.4%. A slowdown in India is a big reason for the downgrade. Trade tensions between the US and China, though, have also taken a toll on the world economy. And while the IMF says risks are on the downside, it said, quote, there is no room for complacency. Meanwhile, NGO Oxfam has a new report out on wealth inequality. The numbers are quite stunning. It found that just over 2,000 billionaires have more wealth than 60% of the world's population. Earlier on the sidelines of the World Economic Forum, France 24's Stephen Carroll spoke with the head of Oxfam India about growing inequality.
What's making it worse is the rigged economic system. It's a system which is tilted in favor of the super rich, and it is also part of crony capitalism, where you're ensuring that the policies are in favor of the rich, which is going to make the rich people richer at the expense of poor, ordinary citizens, women and girls, and planet Earth. So that's what we're looking at. The decisive action needs to come from the governments. They need to ensure that everybody pays their due share of taxes. It's also important, particularly in the context of care economy, that governments spend in building the social infrastructure, taking childcare, ensuring public health, ensuring public education. That's the kind of investments that the government needs to make. And also ensuring that everybody gets a living wage.
And finally, a closely watched trial kicks off in Vancouver, Canada. The chief financial officer of Huawei, Meng Wanzhou, is facing potential extradition to the United States. She's accused by Washington of violating U.S. sanctions on Iran and was arrested back in late 2018. Tech giant Huawei has been gaining ground worldwide, but faces security concerns in the U.S. Chinese authorities have cast those aside and say Wanzhou's trial is politically motivated.
The Chinese government is unwavering when it comes to safeguarding Chinese nationals' legitimate rights and interests. We once again urge Canada to take seriously China's position and concerns, correct its mistake with concrete actions, release Miss Meng Wanzhou, and let her return safely as soon as possible.
And Laura will be looking at the story closely over the next few days. And also an uncomfortable position for Canada here in the middle of two of the world's largest economies, US and China, both putting some pressure there.
Absolutely difficult position to be in. Cole, thank you very much indeed.